again. So that we should be getting a copy that begins at this point. So, welcome everybody. We're talking about vacant land, really a fun subject. And Badal is here with Envoy Mortgage. Do you have loans if somebody wanted to buy land? Because I get people that say, well, yeah, I'm interested in buying some land. And I talk to, my bank and they said I was pre-approved for this amount of money. So yeah, I want to buy land about that price. Does that work or is there something special about that?
So bank don't offer non-QM loans. Bank only offer QM loans, right? And if agents don't know what is non-QM loans means you never met me. So hi, I am Badal from Envoy Mortgage. Help you with QM loans and non-QM loans, and we can go deep dive, uh, Michael, with the presentation. Yeah.
All right. Did you want to talk about that now or at the end after I banged on about buying a?
I think let's do later. So let's agent understand the whole idea about land and the cherry on the ice cream that having this programs.
All right. Yes, you're lucky. You get to be the cherry on the ice cream. I'm right. All right. So we're going to talk about buying vacant land. There would be another class on listing vacant land. There's a vacant land listing agreement, a vacant land advisory sort of. In fact, I think I've included that in the handout just for fun. And if you go into the legal Q&As and things like that and searching for vacant land, you'll see there's a quick guide on vacant land scams. And with the vacant land scam, it's a form of identity theft where somebody finds vacant land that may not have a loan on it, and they essentially pretend to be the owner. They file stuff to get the title messed up so that they can attempt to sell it, and they then at a low price, and they list it with an agent, and then somebody buys it, and then they take the buy, they close and they take the money and leave. Right, so that's on the listing side. The title companies generally spend a lot of time verifying that the person selling it is the one who is in fact signing the contract to sell it, but it's not always as simple. So when Badal was talking about QM loans, I always think, QM, like the Queen Mary, isn't that what, I don't know, something like that. But there are certain kinds of what are qualified loans. If it's a 1 to 4 unit residential product, right, you get a certain group of loans. Land is not a 1 to 4 unit residential product. And to a large extent, you don't get loans to buy land. If you're talking about buying raw land that's out in they don't lend you money to buy the land. They might lend you money because you got something else. But I'll get into that. But generally, unless you've got approved plans and the entitlements are done and there's ready to issue building permits, a lot of lenders do not want to lend you money. Right? Because the value of the land is so dependent upon what you do with it. And right now you haven't done anything with it. And so it's very, very speculative. All right. So you have one. All right. So I'm assuming you have a buyer who wants to buy land. How do you find land for sale? Well, you go to your trusty multiple listing service. You type in a search, for land, and you get some things, maybe. Further away the land is, the fewer things you get. When there are different stratas in the commercial world, right? The bottom strata of commercial is relatively inexpensive land and commercial properties, right? Like I've sold a commercial retail property for $800,000. Right, it wasn't that long ago. It just was a cheap little 400 square foot, So they're not in that lower tier. The rules are a little bit different from when you get to, well, the land is $1 million or $5 million or $10 million, right? Then everything starts to change. right? And the clients that are interested in the people you're working with and what they expect you to do, all of that changes depending upon where you are in that food chain. So I'm assuming that the clients that you're going to have are the typical, I'm a residential real estate agent and no one, and I know somebody who wants to buy land kind of a thing. They're not talking about millions of dollars, but we're going to buy a parcel of land, three or four of us, we're going to build three or four houses and we'll all live there like our own little compound, that sort of thing. Yeah. So how do we find land for sale? We'll go ahead and search the MLS, but one of the challenges is there's two kinds of commercial companies. There are commercial companies like eXp Realty. You can do commercial real estate at eXp, right? That means commercial leasing. You could sell commercial land. You could lease commercial land. We don't do property management and business opportunities. And we're members of the Board of Realtors in the MLS. If you go to eXp Commercial Division, well, they're not members of the Board of the Realtors in the MLS. They're not members because they don't want to be, right? Because at a certain level, you as a commercial agent want to be able to say, I am a commercial only agent. I'm not dabbling in commercial. I don't sell mobile homes or condos, right? I'm not one of them. So almost all the major commercial companies that you can think of aren't members of the Board of Realtors in the MLS, which means if you work for them, you can't be a member either. Now, what that also means relative to the discussion we're having today, they don't have California Association of Realtors forms, right? Because you only get those if you're a member of the California Association of Realtors, and they're not members of the California Association of Realtors. So what do they use? There's another set of forms called AIR. Originally, it was the American Industrial Real Estate or something like that. But they have a set of commercial only forms. So does C.A.R. Now I've given you a copy of the AIR form and a little bit of an explanation of the differences, but some of it is just snootiness. You understand what I'm saying? So if there are some commercial agents who think they'll look down on you if they see you as a typical residential agent that's encroaching in their area of expertise and you don't even have the right forms, right? You're using the realtor forms and they're not realtors and they look down. So what's the next set of forms? It's called AIR. Now, I have a subscription because my team does commercial transactions. I have a subscription to AIR because sometimes the listing agent is going to tell you we do not want to see a C.A.R. form. Right? We don't want to see one. Right? We want you to use an AIR form. And by the way, if you were at eXp's commercial division, you would have access to AIR forms, but not zip forms. So anyhow, is everybody with me? The forms change. As you move up the scale even further, you have brokerages that write their own forms. They hire lawyers and they write their own listing agreements, their own purchase agreements. And then as you move up even further in the food chain, lawyers write contracts for everything that gets done. Right. Not exactly fresh, but they start with templates and things, and they write the contract. And real estate agents aren't really even involved in the writing of the contract because lawyers do that. So we're focusing today on that initial stage, which are the kind of transactions that you'd be doing with people that you might meet just as a normal course of selling real estate. They want to buy land. All right. Much of what's for sale is not in the MLS. Many of the big commercial brokerages are not members of the MLS. So now what do you do? Well, I'm sure that many of you already know that if you are, here, let me share this. I know you already know because you're a smart group of people. And by the way, I'm going to be doing a class coming up on RPR, at the Association of Realtors, and you can see up here in RPR, there's a toggle between residential and commercial. So let's say I want to buy some land. I want it to be in Santa Clara County, and I'm looking for something that is active, and I've selected land. And because I put $5 million, because it goes up to like 50, and I could add more filters. For example, I also could be looking for public records because maybe the land that my client wants doesn't have a for sale sign. But that doesn't mean the person may not want to, sell it. So if I want to search public records of people that have land in a particular zip code or geographic area, I could do that. But I'm looking for something that's for sale, and I'll explain how do they know it's for sale. And I put in $5 million. I could put in some other characteristics, blah, blah, blah. Let's just see what we get. And here's a nice little parcel, active, new, and it's in San Jose. Some of them just say active. Notice that one, we'll click on it. Now, one of the things you're going to notice, this one appears to be on the multiple listing service, but some of them, like let's look at this one, are not. And if you're wondering, well, if they're not, how is this showing up? All of the ones I'm finding are also on the MLS. The commercial search in RPR searches a company called Crexi. So the database, what you get when you run an RPR search is you get a Crexi search combined with an MLS search. That's what you get. So if it's in any of the major MLSs and it's land, it's going to show up. But Crexi, if I simply said I want to buy land for sale in San Jose, if I asked artificial intelligence this, what I'm going to see, what comes up here, here's Crexi, right? So Crexi is a free to post website for commercial property. Free. And so we click on Crexi. So Crexi's database is incorporated in the National Association of Realtors database. Just saying, right? And then you see the next one is LoopNet. So LoopNet is probably the biggest of these sites. The challenge with LoopNet is it costs like $190 a month to run an ad on LoopNet as an agent at the lowest tier. So sometimes land can be for sale for a year. Agents don't want to keep paying $180 a month, so they stop advertising on LoopNet. If somebody's not paying, it's not going to show up. But and then you can see there's some other land watch, land search. Most of these start to show the same properties. One of the values of finding it in RPR, we're going to click on this, is that if we find it in RPR, we can go over here and you'll see on the right, there's a wolf howling in front of a red moon. And we click on that. And what this is integration with zip forms. Oh my gosh, he's actually going to talk about the forms. And so we can just click on start a new transaction. And this is a purchase. And we're going to go to zip forms. And it's going to give us an error because it knows people are watching. So I'll try it again. And see if we can. All right. Or not. How about this? Let me find the handout that we were going over today. All right, let me do this. Because I have copies of the forms here. Does everybody see this? Does that look beautiful? I spent hours. All right. So I have an explainer video. This actually is pretty good out of the box to let a client watch. It doesn't, tell them to call me or anything like that. But it's a really good video about the process of going through the purchase of vacant land. Here's sample forms. Now, I've given you sort of a comparison of the California Association of Realtors vacant land purchase agreement versus the A.I.R. C.R.E. Offer and purchase agreement. That's the official name of it. I have copies of the A.I.R. The C.A.R. one is what we would be using probably within the lower level of the business. And it gives you just a little bit of of a rundown of what the differences are. Uh, I have watched many real estate agents' careers go flaming down and collapse on the ground as a result of land transactions, particularly big ones. And what happens is somebody wants to buy $5 million worth of land, and you're doing the math, right? If you were going to ask the general question, is the real estate agent's commission on land higher, lower, or about the same as compared to a single family home? What would you guys say? The average, I mean, we're not setting commissions and there is no vendor commission. All right, right. But as a general, if we were to average all the commissions that were being charged, and we came up with an average for single family homes, and we came up with an average for land, which would be higher? The land or the single family home? Anyone have no one wants to shout out?
In terms of percentage, it might be lower. In terms of dollar value, it might be higher.
It might be, but it's oftentimes the other way around. So oftentimes land is a higher percentage than a single family home. And if you're thinking, well, that's crazy, the single family home, there's a building and there's termites and all this other kind of stuff, just wait, right? Just wait. Because if you've got vacant land, this is the issue. The buyer doesn't want to buy the land unless the buyer is absolutely convinced that the buyer is going to be able to do what the buyer wants to do with the land. So the big contingency in the purchase of land is that the buyer has to become satisfied that everything is cool and they can do what they want. That requires permission from the city. How long could that take? Could take more than a year, could take years, right? You understand if they're going back and forth with submitting plans and this plan's being rejected, and then you need to get a variance because it's a conditional use, it's not a permitted use, and then you have to have a hearing and you have to win the hearing to get the use changed so that you can do, you understand this could go on for a really long time. And agents can spend a whole lot of time and they're dreaming of the big check. Oh my gosh, it's when this thing closes. Oh, it'll all be so good. Right. And then after a year, the buyer says, well, this isn't going to work. Yeah, we think we're going to go someplace else. All right, well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Goodbye. Bye. And then the real estate agent is thinking, I had to do something else for a living. What kind of business is this? I worked my heart out. Right, and I'm getting nothing. Right, so most of what we're going to talk about is, first of all, whatever the buyer wants to do, it has to be zoned for it. Now, by the way, can you get and incorporate, this is what I want to do, into a commercial appraisal? The answer is yes, but commercial appraisals cost they start like at $6,000 and go up. Right, this is far more difficult because you have to determine what the highest and best use is. Now, in determining the highest and best use, they would be looking at current zoning and land use. So whatever it is your buyer wants to do, the buyer has to be convinced that they could do it. Well, one of the things you can do, and the listing agent may have already done, but there may not be a listing agent, is you could research the property and know what the zoning allows. Every city has an interactive zoning map. You put in the address, it'll tell you what the zoning is. You get a list of permitted uses. You get a list of conditional uses, conditional use permits, which are things that if you ask nicely, they might let you do. And, if your client says, "Oh, that'll work for me," then ahead you go. Right, but I've had them fall apart because the person moving, the buyer wanted to have run their medical business in the building. They were buying the building, but there were rentals and things like that, and they weren't allowed in that area to have a medical business. Right. They could have retail, but not a medical, not in that, you know. So it all went away. You tell all of this stuff, and this is sort of a guide that goes through. There is a listing agreement. It's a separate listing agreement. It wouldn't hurt you to look at it. The seller disclosures. Here, let's just look at one. All right. The sample forms, open it up, and I'm going to see. Now, I think this is cool. Notice on the right-hand side, Gemini is coming alive and reading the document. Isn't that nice of them? Right, that I have pulled up, and it's summarizing it. And I could ask it a question if I wanted to know. So it starts with agency disclosure. That's required in commercial as well as residential. The C.A.R. has gone to great lengths to make their commercial form look like their residential form, which is one of the reasons that commercial companies don't like it. Just saying. But I'm going to focus on the part that is different from the standard purchase agreement. Right. So the beginning isn't much different. It looks exactly the same price, close of escrow. Now, one of the things you have to take into consideration, and one of the criticisms of the C.A.R. form is that it sort of imports the time periods from the residential purchase agreement, and in land, the time periods are much, much longer. They're much longer. How long could it take to get even a preliminary answer from the city? Whether or not they're going to let you build what you want to, I mean, what, a month, 2 months? Right. So you're going to remove your contingencies in 2 days. No, yeah, I mean, there's a lot longer, a lot more involved due diligence. So the close of escrow would oftentimes be longer. How long you have to come up with an estimate as to what exactly it is the buyer needs to know from the city and county, and for having them contact the city. A lot of times we submit plans even before they bought the property. Right? The buyer will actually go to the city and say, "Here are the plans. What will you do if I buy the property and I give them to you then?" And the city will say, "Well, we would reject it," or, "Well, if you change that way," and then they work that out, and then the buyer says, "Okay, let's close." Right? Because they don't want to close and then find out that the city won't let them do it. Right? That's the big contingency. Right? And that could make the escrow go much longer. How long is it going to take for that back and forth? So the rest of this is pretty much the same. Loan amounts, be sure that if you have a buyer that, and particularly this happens on inexpensive properties, 100,000, 200,000, something like that, in a major metropolitan area or something, right? And there's something, it's a small little piece of property probably. And somebody says, "Well, I talked to my lender and they said I could get $1 million." Make sure that they've said to their lender that this is vacant land, right? Because it's not the same. And so we usually do not see land loans on the lower levels where the land is the security for the loan. Right? If you're getting a loan, it's more of the hard money. But don't expect that you're going to be able to get a 80-90% loan on a piece of land, right? So you need to make sure that they got the cash, or you've talked to the loan agent. The loan agent knows what kind of property it is. They talked to Badal. He knows, right, the questions to ask and what kind of loan they're going to need. This part is the same, right? The paragraph 3G is the, payment to the buyer's broker. That you could put in also a credit. You can write it in other places. All of this is kind of the same. Now, notice it mentions the purchase of manufactured home, um, and construction loan financing. And so a lot of times you find vacant land that has a manufactured house on top of it, a trailer but they're bigger, they look nicer. And it's technically land because that manufactured home may not have permits and all that sort of stuff. So you're buying it as personal property. And is that included? And you would, check that because if it's not, if depending on how it's attached and whether it's permitted, it may be the purchase of personal property. Construction loan financing, a draw will or will not be used to finance the property. All right. So a construction draw, also known as an obligatory advance sometimes, it starts with the concept that lenders are far more likely to lend based upon a completed project than raw land in a dream. So if you have architect drawings and you've submitted them and the city has blessed them and you've got the contractor ready and you have ready to issue building permits and now you go to a lender and you say, look at, when this is done, it's going to be worth this amount. We just need that much. Right. And will you lend us the money? I had a transaction over in Aptos where the land was 1.2 million. The construction loan was like 3 million, but the property was worth 6 million when it was finished. It had a walking distance to Rio Del Mar Beach. And so the lender lent on the package. Right. So they lent you the money to buy the land, they lent you the money to build because they knew that it was going to be built. And then the advances, they don't give the contractor all the money, but they come in parcels and look at it. So when a certain part is done, they release a certain amount of the money, that sort of thing. So this is simply asking whether or not that kind of a financing arrangement is being used in the purchase of the property. Cash is better. But if you've got the entitlements, the permits, you have more lending operations. Investigation, this is the same. Seller documents, this is the same. There's sometimes common interest developments. Sometimes there's leased or lien things like propane tanks or stuff like that. The sale, all of that. Now there is a vacant lot delivery, which is you're not supposed to have much there, but if there's a tenant, sometimes it's leased. Tenants leasing vacant lots don't have the same rights that tenants leasing apartments and things like that do. But they usually the delivery is vacant, but you could keep the tenant if you wanted to. Documents, that's pretty much the same. The NHD is a requirement. Environmental survey phase one. Okay. A phase one environmental survey is like the NHD environmental report on steroids, pumped up. And it costs like 2,003, it could talk 2 to 3 grand. And so it's a binder you get with little books in it, and it's a really, really intense survey of any possible toxic hazards in the area. Was there an abandoned gas station? Were pesticides used in farming, and on and on and on. And if the phase one determines that there is toxicity in the soil, depending upon what the buyer intends to do with the land, there may be a requirement to go to phase two. And what phase two is that you have to pay these contractors and engineers to come out and actually remove the contaminated dirt from the site and carry it away to a approved depository. Now this costs, well, a lot more, right? So it depends if the land happened to be used as farmland in the past, chances are there are chemicals in the soil. So what do you plan on doing with it? Right. And so most of the time in the inexpensive land purchases, people aren't interested in paying for a $2,000 phase one environmental. But should you as an agent or your clients understand, by the way, if you're on my team, one of the reasons that you can do commercial is because you're on my team and I'm approved by the California broker at EXP for commercial real estate. I was the commercial mentor at Keller Williams Cupertino when I was there. And so I get more involved in the commercial transactions, explaining stuff like this, particularly if the client hasn't done this before. All right. Point of sale requirements, that's pretty much the same. Escrow and title, you can go by the escrow and title fees that are customary for residential are generally the same ones for commercial, but it's all negotiable. You could say each to pay their own and then fight about it later as to what that means. Right, because some things are split, some things are not, but that's just customary. It's better to spell it out. But the same system we would use to determine customary, we would use title, county, city transfer tax, HOA. All this looks pretty much the same. Now, when we get to addendum and advisories, we start to get into some more fun. Now, the beginning of it is the probate is but residential units purchase addendum. Sometimes we have one of these going on right now where there is a lot, raw land, right, which is being used for parking and stuff. But then there's also another lot and owned by the same people, and there's some manufactured homes sitting on it that are being rented out. So we have residential units also, and we have raw land. And so we might throw that in, right? You have to make the decision, which is this more of, right? Other addendum, septic well, property monument, and propane addendum, right? We're talking about, the hillbillies now, where, what are the issues with land? And I'm in Morgan Hill. Lots of people want to buy land in Morgan Hill, right? They think this will be great. Maybe even Gilroy, we'll get a couple of acres, some buddies of mine, we'll all pitch in, we'll own it, we'll each have our own house. Yeah, okay. But most of the land that's available is zoned rural residential. Rural residential, doesn't matter how many acres it is, allows you one main house and one second, I was about to say outhouse, but one other house, like an ADU or something like that. And it doesn't matter if it's 3 acres, 5 acres, 10 acres. You can't do multifamily. You can't subdivide. Plus, to build anything, this is up a little windy road up at the top of the hill, right? 4-wheel drive and that. I mean, it's so expensive. It's really expensive to build it. And then they don't have water up there, and they don't have power up there, and you have to have a satellite. You understand that? Oh, this isn't so good. Right. So if the land involves that sort of stuff, where there's a septic tank because there's no city sewer, there's a well because there's no city water, you've got the property monument is sometimes it's very, very difficult to know where the land is. Now that may seem like you're crazy, it's there, right? Well, let's say it's not urban land, but it's rural land. And where does there is no mailbox with an address on it, right? Where does it start? How far back does it go? What are it's called the four corners. What are they? There may be a fence, but that's not necessarily accurate. There may not even be a fence. How do you figure that out? Where does it even start and end? right? Well, if the listing agent isn't there to show you, you eventually you might have to hire a survey, an engineer, $1,000 to go out and tell you exactly where, and that requires that they have a monument to start with. That's why I was mentioning that form, so that they can pinpoint where the location of the lot is. Does that sound like fun? And then there's some other, boxes to check. The rest of this is the standard purchase agreement. There's not a lot in here. It's basically what's in the RPA, only trimmed down because it's vacant land, but they pretty much just moved everything over. If we go through all of it, and it's just as long, right? It's got almost all the same, the advisory. Now, inspection advisory. I always begin the conversation with, have you ever done this before? Bought land. Have you ever done this before? And if they say no, I've never done this before, then the whole thing is really about research. And I would explain to them, and I have a link, by the way, to a explainer video where I go into this through AI a little bit more, but the role of the buyer is not just the role of a buyer in a commercial transaction, they're the investigator. If you're buying a 1 to 4 unit owner occupied residential property, the law assumes that you're the weakling in the boxing ring and you need protection. If you're a buyer in something that's not a 1 to 4 unit residential property, the assumption is you know what you're doing, or you shouldn't be doing it, right? You've moved into a different league where they presume that you know what you're doing. So they're not looking out to help you as much as in residential. And by the way, as a real estate agent, it's a violation of the NAR Code of Ethics for you to get involved in areas of real estate for which you are not trained or monitored or whatever. And the most common problem is a residential agent who handles a commercial transaction and screws it up. And then there's, lawyers and all of that sort of thing. So if you're on my team and you can do a commercial transaction, we do a lot of them, but talk to me about it. So this is basically explaining to the buyer that you become an investigator. As a buyer, you become an investigator. You need to contact the building permits. You have to the building department. Call them up. If you call them up and say, "I'm thinking about buying this property, and this is what I want to do with it. Can I do it?" They're going to say yes, no, or it all depends, right? But you have to become an investigator, right? There's not as much protection. So and it talks about natural hazards and whether or not you can subdivide the property may or may not be true. Right? And if you're basing it on that you're going to carve it up, you better find that out first. PRBS, that's the same. Fair housing, this is everything just loaded up, right? From the residential all here. This is the seller's vacant land advisory, which I included for your edification. This is what we would give on a listing to a seller. And it explains what the general disclosure rules are, which are that the seller has to disclose any known material facts, tell the truth. All right. There is no requirement for a transfer disclosure statement. TDS is only for 1 to 4 unit residential. No seller property questionnaire. There's a questionnaire which C.A.R. has added, which we'll look at in a minute. But there's no legal requirement. The only thing, I've had commercial transactions where the other agent was a residential agent, and the residential transaction coordinator would call me up and say, "Do you have a disclosure package?" And I'd say, "I sent it to you." And they're like, "Well, no, all I got is a prelim and an NHD." And I said, "Yeah, that's it." And they're like, "Well, what do you mean that's it?" What about the TDS? You don't get any of that. You don't get any of it. right? And the form they used did not ask. They were anyhow. They were using the old form, which simply said the seller has to disclose material facts. The new form actually requests that the seller fill out a questionnaire, because until they added that, that wasn't even a requirement. So this is what the seller is told that the seller's contractual duties are, which is they have to tell the truth about anything that they know that might affect the value or marketability of the property. Now, in order to help them think of what they might know that could affect the value or marketability of property, they have a questionnaire. So this is very much like the seller property questionnaire. See, the other form, the A.I.R. form, would make reference to something called a property information sheet, which was a series of general questions about the property. So the A.I.R. form to purchase land required that this, that the seller fill out that disclosure, but the C.A.R. one back then did not. It simply said the seller has to say anything that they know that would affect the value or marketability of the property, but they didn't say you have to answer these questions. And so it was in response to that, because we were all using the other form, that the C.A.R. finally added this form. So that, and they've updated it, no, back in 23. So this is like the seller property questionnaire, but it's for vacant land. They basically have removed questions that wouldn't apply to vacant land, added a few more in, but tried to keep as much as possible. So if you use the C.A.R. contract, the seller's supposed to fill this out. If it's a listing, and I would probably just go ahead and fill it out, even because we don't know. It's a good way for the seller to tell you everything that they know about the property. This is a vacant land additional inspection advisory, which is, I think it's already, did we already look at it? Because it may be attached to the offer, but this basically says that you are advised to conduct investigations of the entire property, including but not limited to finance. Right? Make sure that whoever they're talking to about getting a loan knows it's land. Construction costs. What will it cost to build utilities? Environmental survey. That's the phase one. NHD subdivision. That we've already seen that. This is the environmental consent. I don't know why I included it, but it was part of my normal group, which is before you can do the environmental survey, the owner of the property has to say it's okay. If the land has been used for agricultural purposes in the past, we would throw in this questionnaire, which is similar in some ways to the other questionnaire, but this one is specific for agriculture because, again, of the pesticides and the water and stuff like that. This is what the enemy of C.A.R.'s form looks like. It has a very different look and feel. If you don't have access, if you only do commercial real estate and you don't have access to C.A.R. forms, this is what you have. I can fill this out through zip forms. You could add it too. It's like $200 a year. And I'm showing it to you just so you could get, a sense to see what it's like. Again, if you have anything involving commercial real estate and you're on my team, I expect that you're going to contact me and let me help you go through some of this. But you can see, it's a shorter, it has simpler language in some cases, but that's what the other form looks like. Now, one of the differences is, where is the good part? Where is it? Here we go. Paragraph 27. So what's in the purchase agreement, what is the most important paragraph? And it's, of course, paragraph 3, and particularly on the residential one, P3G, which is the commission, right? Where does it say you're to get paid a commission? And so paragraph 27 in the AIR contract has a place where you could write in the commission that you're asking the seller to pay. The MLS NAR settlement does not affect land sales because it's not 1 to 4 unit residential. The California Civil Code rule that went into effect in January that says you have to have a buyer representation agreement as soon as practical, but definitely before you write an offer, that applies to land too. Right? But not everything applies. And right, there's no, if you had a loan, the RESPA does not apply, the Real Estate Settlement Procedures Act. Truth in lending doesn't apply, right? It's commercial, not residential. Any questions about that so far? If while we're, one more minute, then I'm gonna let. So we could have started a transaction in zip forms right from RPR. You'll also know, and RPR, you'll notice, also has a button for CREXI. Sometimes this comp stack, sometimes, I don't know. There we go. The challenge is that most of the transactions that involve commercial property do not go through the multiple listing service, which means you can't get easily information about what happened. How do you know that the property actually sold and for how much? Well, RPR knows that because the public records, when the sale of the land happens, it's recorded at the county recorder's office, and RPR can say that land sold for this amount of money. Right? You can do that and then come up with, what is the land value based upon what land is selling for in that area. But oftentimes to the buyer, the value of the land is based upon what the buyer wants to do with the land. So even though you could say, well, with the land, you could do this and it would be worth that, the buyer might say, well, I don't want to do this. I don't want it. I want to do something else. And if I do something else, then I can't afford to pay that much for the land. You understand they only pay what it's worth to them. But if you're looking for market information, what has land been selling for, that sort of stuff, you can do that through the public record search. You have to look at CREXI, you have to look at LoopNet, you have to look at Land Search, you have to look at all of the different sites because it's not all aggregated together in one easy to search platform. But it might be soon. It might be soon. Yeah. Any questions about that? About what we've done so far? Was that helpful? Are you scared now of going to land? If you're not scared, I wasn't. I wasn't effective enough. So, Vidal, talk to us about this. I want to buy some land. I got a regular job. I'm going to hang on to it for a little while, and then I'm going to build a house and retire there. What can you do for me? Can I get like a 90% on that?
Yeah, definitely. So,
Really?
see, when see, the great information when you are working with uh, land contracts. It's good you have a, you know, you it will be good when you have a full potential, strategy with the financial options. So I want to present and give you great few options for loan programs that will empower you as a agent, to adding more buyers and more contracts and more deals with you. So if you don't know me, I'm your partner in real estate transaction. I help on mortgages, QM and non-QM products. And as I mentioned before, if you don't know about non-QM programs and you want to expand your clientele by adding, more deals in your transactions, how you do it, you reach out to me, either call or text me. I would have happy to help you go deep dive. So in today's session, today's cherry on the ice cream, I want you to when you navigating your this agreement, why agents needs to know about financing, right? I'm trying to add a value. You want to expand your buyers pool, right? Because buyers will walk away when they know that land, they assume that lands deals are only cash, right? But when you know that there is some options, keep your deal alive, right? So you can close more deals when you don't have uh, option to finance. But when you have option to finance, you can close more deals. We sit with the buyers, you can answer yes, you can do it. When you can say, yeah, I cannot do it, right? Buyers don't Most of the buyers don't want to spend whole of their portfolio into buying a land. So when they see they have more options, for as an agent you able to close more deals, and you can differentiate yourself by knowing more details, right? So that's like the goal is for me to help you close more deals. Three great programs: stand alone land purchase program, another program, when a buyer has a plan ready, for construction plan ready, whether they wants to build a residential unit or multi-family residential unit. So when they have plan ready, so I have a program for that. And another program which is not directly kind of a land program, but it's a fix and flip land program. So I have a three great program and some more detail about that three great program. So let's talk about program number one. This Not all the every lander is offering this. So standalone land program, when you want to buy land and securing the parcel for future construction, you don't have plan ready, you just wants to buy a land. Buyer wants to just invest on the land property, and they will figure out what to do later on, right? So we have program 10-year fixed rate term, 50K to 500K loan amount, and up to 20 acres land. The important part is it has to be zoned for residential units, and you can have a maximum amount, 80% loan amount. So if you have like 620k property value, you can get up to 500k loan for a parcel. So if it's like, you will think about, hey, how much, what am I gonna get it, like even though you get like 10,000k parcel or 20k parcel where you can build easily, like 2-3 units, you can get a land loan and figure out the construction later on. Minimum requirement is 680 FICO, 680 credit score. um, you can have just 3 to 6 month reserve, and you can close under LLC. So you can either close under yourself or under LLC. uh, Talking, I just had a one small talking point. So when you work with buyers, and the talking point, we don't have a construction plan ready or construction is imminent, this is the great program you will get. um Another, the important part is saying yes, right? When you say, hey, the client will ask you, hey, can we get a financing for the land? If your answer is yes, you are keeping that deal alive. You're and you are you when you know these programs, or when you know a little bit about this program, you will be yourself as a resource beyond just showing a property, right? So that's important. And you are enabling client for with the investment options, and you are adding more buyers in your portfolio. So you have, it's beyond just cash only deals, and you are adding more clientele. Second great program is about construction, ground up construction with the land purchase. What does that mean? So you have a land, there is a great land opportunity, and a buyer has a plan ready to build, units there, and either they wants to sell it or they wants to rent it. So this is a great program. You can use this for 2 to 4 units, single family units, or 2 to 4 units. This is a short term program, so up to 18 months without prepayment penalty, up to 85. So if your project cost, for example, $3 million including land purchase, so you can get up to $10 million loan. If project including land purchase, including your project construction cost, is up to $10 million, you can get easily up to 85 LTV, means 15% down payment. Um, why we want to do that, right? Like, the small developer has some experience, some wants to expand their investment, just apart from just real estate. Then you have opportunity to use this program, ground of construction. um, and you and most good part of this program, you pay what you draw, right? So you don't have to pay interest on the whole amount that you qualify for or you approved for. Say, for example, you bought the land, $1 million land, out of $3 million project, and then you started withdrawing for construction step by step, phase by phase. So you only needs to pay the interest for that what you draw funds, right? So you don't have to pay upfront everything. So this is a good program for construction with land purchase. A simple process. So we covered both the land and the construction cost. 100%, sorry, nine up to 95% of construction cost, and 100% of loan land cost, but total has to be 85 LTV, means 15% down payment. um what you do after finishing the construction? So there are a few options, because this is a short term loan program, right? So you you have to pay back in 18 months. So what you gonna do? Say, hey, I don't, like, you don't want to burden of selling the property. Yeah, you can convert into the conventional loan after 18 months. So once construction is done, building is ready, either for selling it, sell back to other investors, or you want to rent it out. So you have options. You can convert into conventional loan, or DSCR loans, where you can rent it out these properties. Program number 3, fix and flip. So uh, when there is a structure already built in, you need to rehab that property. You need some financial option. So this is also another great options. Up to 90% of purchase price, 100% of rehab cost, means 100% of cost to fix it. Maximum loan to cost is 95. Loan to cost means, um, so there are two numbers. One's after repair value, ARV, and one is loan to cost. So how much it cost to fix it and buy it. So that's 895. And after repair value is some, I think it's 85. I read somewhere. So 1 to 4 unit, great 50K to $100 million loan amount. So great program. You can buy like multi-unit property, fix it, and convert into conventional loan or sell back to the different investors. um so this is some more information. I'll share this slide with you, and this is a comparison between these three programs. Land purchase is 10-year fixed purchase, 180% LTV. Construction, ground up construction is 80 loan to cost, 85 loan to cost means 15% down. And fix and flip is 12-month program, because you in fixing you don't need that long term. So fix and flip allows you to 95 LTC, means just a 5% down, and you can rotate the property and sell back. Great. So I you just call me for any questions or concerns, or any deal that you have in place, or deal stuck in the past. So let's discuss, and let me help you out. Any questions?
Well, you have more programs than I thought you would. I shouldn't have, but you have a lot more options than
Yeah, commercial side we have more options. This is like I was focused on, residential side constructions, but yeah, commercial there's a it's a different whole
right.
different
Yeah.
ballpark.
All right, how are we doing, everybody? Are all the note takers happy? All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for participating. If you're on my team and you're doing something with land and that sort of thing, talk to me. You know what I mean? Talk to me. And the higher up we go in price, the more we should talk about all the different forms. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Michael. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Vidal.
Bye, but